Harald Hardrada, the deadliest Viking to ever live. Harald Hardrada, also known as Harald Sigurdsson, is often described as the last great Viking. His life is a saga of adventure, warfare, ambition, and tragedy, stretching across the known world of the 11th century. He was a warrior who fought in battles from Scandinavia to Byzantium, a mercenary who served as a commander in the Varangian Guard, a king who ruled Norway with iron authority, and a claimant to the throne of England, whose defeat at the Battle of Stamford Bridge marked the end of the Viking Age. But to call Harald simply a king or a warrior is to underestimate his story. His life reads like the most dramatic of sagas, filled with moments of daring escape, ruthless conquest, and almost unbelievable ambition. Was Harald Hardrada truly the deadliest Viking to ever live? To answer that, we must trace his life from his beginnings to his legendary end. Harald was born in the year 1015, the younger half-brother of Olaf II of Norway, who would later be canonized as Saint Olaf. Growing up in an age of turmoil, Harald was exposed to violence and ambition from an early age. His brother Olaf sought to claim the throne of Norway, but faced opposition from powerful rivals, including King Snut, the Great of Denmark and England. In 1030, Olaf attempted to reclaim his kingdom, but was killed at the Battle of Stiklestad. Harald, only 15 years old at the time, fought bravely beside his brother, but was severely wounded and forced to flee. This moment, though tragic, was the beginning of Harald's incredible journey. Wounded and on the run, he made his way east, crossing into the lands of Kievan Rus. There he found refuge with Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise in Novgorod. Harald spent several years in exile, serving as a soldier and earning a reputation for his courage and skill. But Harald's ambitions stretched far beyond being a refugee prince. He set his sights on the Byzantine Empire, where the famed Varangian Guard recruited hardened warriors from the north. Harald traveled to Constantinople, the glittering heart of the Byzantine world, and entered the service of the emperor. The Varangian Guard was an elite unit, fiercely loyal to the emperor, and feared across the empire. Harald quickly rose through the ranks, demonstrating both his ferocity in battle and his cunning in leadership. During his years in Byzantine service, Harald fought in campaigns across the Mediterranean, North Africa, and even as far as the Holy Land. Sources suggest that he fought in Sicily against Arab forces, in campaigns against pirates, and in brutal civil wars within the empire itself. He amassed both wealth and experience, learning the tactics of one of the most sophisticated armies of the medieval world. Some accounts even claim that Harald traveled to Jerusalem, where he was permitted to enter the holy city and view its sacred sites, a rare honor for a foreign warrior. But Harald's time in Byzantium was not without controversy. His ambition sometimes put him at odds with the emperor, and stories tell of his eventual imprisonment after accusations of disloyalty. Ever resourceful, Harald escaped confinement, possibly with the help of influential allies, and fled Byzantium. By the time he returned to Kievan Rus, Harald was no longer a wandering exile. He was a seasoned warlord, immensely wealthy from years of service, and ready to claim a throne of his own. In 1046, Harald returned to Norway, where political tensions were once again brewing. His nephew Magnus the Good was king at the time. Rather than plunge the kingdom into immediate civil war, Harald negotiated a deal with Magnus to share power. However, when Magnus died only a year later, Harald became sole ruler of Norway. At last, after years of exile, service, and ambition, Harald had a crown on his head. As king, Harald Hardrada ruled with a strong hand. He was both respected and feared, known for his ruthlessness against rivals and his determination to consolidate power. He modernized Norway's administration, imposed new taxes, and kept tight control over the nobility. Yet his reign was not free from conflict. Harald spent much of his time suppressing rebellions and waging war with neighboring Denmark, as he sought to re-establish the influence that Norway had enjoyed under earlier Viking rulers. But Harald's ambition reached beyond Scandinavia. He dreamed of ruling England, a land that had deep ties to the Vikings. His claim was not entirely baseless. He argued that a prior agreement between his predecessor Magnus and King Harthacnut of Denmark and England gave him a right to the English crown. When Edward the Confessor died in 1066 without a direct heir, the throne of England became the most contested prize in Europe. Harold Godwinson, a powerful English nobleman, was crowned king. William of Normandy, later known as William the Conqueror, also laid claim. But Harald Hardrada would not be left out. In the summer of 1066, Harald gathered a massive invasion fleet, said to number around 300 ships and thousands of warriors. He allied with Tostig Godwinson, the exiled brother of Harold Godwinson, hoping to use internal English rivalries to his advantage. Sailing across the North Sea, Harold landed in northern England and began his campaign. At the Battle of Fulford near York, Harold's forces crushed the local English army of victory that seemed to set the stage for his conquest. Yet fate would not grant Harold his final triumph. Only days later, King Harold Godwinson marched his army north with astonishing speed. On September 25, 1066, the two armies clashed at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Harald Hardrada fought fiercely, leading his warriors in what would become one of the most legendary battles in Viking history. The fighting was brutal, and for a time the Norwegians held their ground. But the English forces, fresh and determined, eventually overwhelmed them. Harald Hardrada was struck in the throat by an arrow and killed on the battlefield. His death marked not only the end of his extraordinary life, but also the symbolic end of the Viking Age. Though raids and wars would continue, the era of great Viking kings who threatened empires and crossed seas in search of conquest effectively ended with Harold's fall at Stamford Bridge. Was Harald Hardrada truly the deadliest Viking to ever live? His life certainly makes a strong case. From his teenage years fighting alongside Saint Olaf to his campaigns in Byzantium, his mercenary adventures across the Mediterranean, and his reign as King of Norway, Harald embodied the spirit of the Viking warrior. He was ruthless, ambitious, and relentless, carving a path of blood and iron across continents. Yet his story is also one of tragedy. His ambition to claim England ended in death, and within weeks of his defeat, Harold Godwinson himself would be killed at the Battle of Hastings, leaving William of Normandy to claim the English crown. Had Harald Hardrada triumphed at Stamford Bridge, the history of England, and perhaps all of Europe, might have been profoundly different. Harold's legacy endures in the sagas, in the chronicles of Byzantium, and in the memory of Norway. To many, he represents the archetypal Viking, larger than life, fearless in battle, and unyielding in ambition. His enemies remembered him with respect, his allies with awe, and history with fascination. In the end, Harald Hardrada was not just a warrior or a king. He was a man who lived as if the world itself was a battlefield to be conquered. His life was a saga written in blood and fire, ending in the shadow of an English arrow. The last great Viking had fallen, but his legend lives on. And so when we ask if Harald Hardrada was the deadliest Viking to ever live, the answer may depend on how we define deathly power. He was not the richest Viking, nor the one who ruled the largest empire, but in sheer reach, in ambition that stretched from Norway to Byzantium to England, and in the fear he inspired across Europe, Harald Hardrada stands as perhaps the most formidable of them all.